8 years is a long time to be dead to the world. Long enough for your name to fade from people's tongues. Long enough for the scent of you to disappear from a man's sheets. Long enough for the city that once devoured you to forget what you sounded like when you laughed. And yet not long enough to forgive what was done to you. I thought time would bury everything I ran from, that the wind would scatter the ashes of who I used to be so far and wide that even he, the man who made me love danger, who made me believe in a kind of passion that could burn down whole empires, wouldn't be able to find me again. But time is a liar, and New York never forgets. It just waits, patient and cruel for the day you're foolish enough to return. The bus hissed as it pulled into the station, the night air biting at the windows, the city skyline carved in steel and shadow beyond the glass. My son slept with his head against my arm, his small hand curled in mine. The only piece of peace I'd ever managed to keep. Luca didn't stir when the bus stopped, didn't see the way my fingers trembled as I reached for my bag, didn't hear the thunder of my heartbeat as I whispered the name I hadn't spoken in years. The name that had once meant everything and nothing at all. Damien Costa. The world used to bow when he walked into a room. I remember the hush that followed him, the way men lowered their eyes out of instinct, the way women drew closer as if heat itself had entered the space. He was power wrapped in charm, destruction dressed in a tailored suit. And for a time, I was the only one who ever saw the man beneath the myth. Or at least, I thought I did. Luca stirred as the driver announced our stop, his lashes fluttering against his cheeks, his voice still heavy with sleep. "Mama, are we here?" "Almost," I whispered, brushing his hair back, those dark waves that were so much like his father's that I could barely look at them some days without feeling the ache of what I'd lost. He yawned, pressing his face into my shoulder. "You said we'd only stay a little while." "I know." The lie came easier than the truth. Just until it's safe again. Safe. The word felt foreign in my mouth, like something I'd never truly known. I'd spent years building a life that wasn't mine. New name, new story, new ghosts. But safety was never real. You can hide from the world, but not from the kind of men who own it. And Damien Costa still owned this city. We stepped off the bus into the cold, and the air hit me like memory. The metallic tang of winter rain, the gasoline hum of midnight traffic, the echo of laughter spilling from bars that never closed. New York hadn't changed, not really. It was still hungry, still full of the same kind of people who smiled while they sharpened their knives. I pulled Luca's hood over his head and kept moving, my heartbeat matching the rhythm of my heels against the cracked pavement. Every street felt haunted. Every corner held a ghost. I half expected to see him there, leaning against a black car with that crooked smile that used to undo me. But ghosts don't come out in the open. They wait in the dark, in the space between your steps. The motel was small and tired, the kind of place where no one asked names and everyone had something to hide. The neon sign buzzed weakly, flickering over the faded paint and the broken vending machine that had probably been empty for years. I paid in cash, signed the name Elena Rossi, and prayed the clerk wouldn't look too closely. He didn't. Men like him never did. Not when you kept your eyes down and your voice soft. Inside, the room smelled faintly of mildew and stale cigarettes, the wallpaper curling at the corners. Luca didn't seem to mind. He sat on the bed and pulled his small notebook from his backpack, the one he used to draw in whenever the world felt too big. I watched him sketch, lines and shadows taking shape beneath his pencil, and realized he was drawing a man. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw, dark eyes. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He looked up at me, serious in the way only children born from chaos can be. "You said my dad was gone, but sometimes when I dream I see him. He's standing by the sea, he's waiting for us." My chest tightened until it hurt. I forced a smile. That's just a dream, sweetheart." But I knew better. Some dreams are memories waiting to be remembered. When he finally fell asleep, I sat by the window and stared out at the city lights. It had been 8 years since I last saw Damien. 8 years since I fled the life we'd built together, pregnant and terrified. The taste of betrayal still fresh on my tongue. He had no idea what he'd done that night. No idea what his choices had cost me. But I had come back for a reason. Someone had found us 2 months ago. A note slipped under our door, unsigned but clear. He deserves to know. And they deserve to die. I didn't know who had written it, but I knew who it was about. Damien's enemies were never short of ghosts either. And if someone had discovered Luca's existence, it wouldn't be long before they used him to reach the one man I'd spent years protecting him from. His father. The clock on the nightstand blinked 1 a.m. I hadn't realized how long I'd been staring at the skyline until I saw movement reflected in the window. A figure standing in the alley below, shadowed beneath the streetlight. My first thought was that I was imagining it, that fear was playing tricks on me. But then the figure lifted his head. Even from up here, I recognized that posture, the way he stood like he owned the ground beneath him. My breath caught in my throat. 8 years hadn't changed him. He was broader now, older, but still carved from the same impossible gravity. I dropped to the floor instinctively, heart hammering, pulling the yaoi, curtains closed. My fingers trembled so hard I nearly tore the fabric. I waited, counting the seconds, every part of me praying I was wrong. But when I dared to peek through the narrow slit, the alley was empty. He was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake beside my son, listening to the rain, to the old buildings breathing, to the ghosts whispering my name. I told myself he couldn't have known I was here, that the man I saw was just some stranger, that the past couldn't possibly have found me again. But deep down, beneath all the lies I'd learned to live with, I felt it, that old, familiar pull, that unholy mixture of fear and longing that only one man could make me feel. Damien Costa knew I was back, and somewhere out there in the dark, he was already coming for me. Sleep has become a luxury I can't afford, and even when exhaustion drags me down into its fragile arms, my dreams are never kind. They are sharp-edged, built from memories that still taste of gunpowder and regret, faces I can't erase no matter how many years stand between us. When I close my eyes, I see him, Damien. The way he looked at me that last night, as if I had ripped something sacred out of him. And maybe I did. The gray light of dawn creeps through the thin curtains, spilling across the cracked ceiling of the motel room like an unwanted guest. Luca is still sleeping, his small chest rising and falling in that steady rhythm that reminds me there's something pure in this world, something untouched by all the darkness I've dragged with me. I envy his peace, the innocence he doesn't know he's already lost. I move quietly, washing my face in the sink, the cold water biting at my skin. The mirror is small and warped, distorting my reflection until I hardly recognize the woman staring back. My hair is darker now, shorter. My eyes are the only thing that hasn't changed, still carrying the shadow of a woman who once believed love could save her from monsters, only to learn the monster was the one she loved. I dress quickly, slipping the small knife I keep hidden into my coat pocket. It's not much, but I've learned that a weapon is less about power and more about resolve. I've had 8 years to build both. By the time I step outside, the city is already awake, horns blaring, people rushing past like ghosts who've forgotten their names. New York has always been cruel that way. It gives you anonymity and takes your soul as payment. I stop at a cafe down the block, the kind of place where no one looks at anyone for too long. I order coffee and sit by the window, forcing my hands to stay still even though every muscle hums with unease. I shouldn't have seen him last night. It should have been impossible. But the image of that figure standing beneath the streetlight won't leave me. Tall, composed, dangerous. It felt like fate reminding me that no matter how far I run, my story has always belonged to him. I catch myself, glancing at every reflection, shop windows, car doors, the chrome edge of a napkin dispenser, half expecting to see his face in each one. And maybe that's why I almost don't notice the man sitting 2 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper. He's good. Too good. Clean-cut, expensive watch, the kind of stillness that comes from training, not patience. I know a bodyguard when I see one. I lived in a house full of them once. When he turns the page, I catch a glimpse of the tattoo inked along his wrist, the mark of the Costa family. My pulse stutters. So it's true. Damien knows I'm back. I leave the coffee untouched, my hands shaking as I scoop up my bag and hurry out into the street. The cold bites through my coat, sharp and mean, the kind of weather that feels personal. I glance back once, and sure enough, the man stands, folds his paper neatly, and follows at a polite distance. It takes me 3 blocks to lose him. I cut through traffic, duck into a narrow alley, and slip through the back of a bookstore that opens onto another street. The adrenaline keeps me moving until I'm certain I've lost his trail. But by then, the truth has already sunk its claws into me. He found me. Damien Costa, the man I once loved enough to die for, knows I'm here. When I return to the motel, Luca is sitting on the bed, sketchbook open, his eyes darting toward the door the second he sees me. Mama? I force a smile I don't feel. Everything's fine. I just went to get breakfast. He tilts his head, studying me in that way that makes him seem older than he is. You're lying. Eat, I say gently, setting a pastry in front of him. We have a long day ahead. But the truth is, I don't have a plan anymore. The letter that brought me back to this city burns in my pocket, its words etched into my mind like a curse. He deserves to know. And they deserve to die. Whoever sent it knew too much. Knew about Damien. Knew about Luca. Knew about the night I ran. And if Damien's men were already watching, it meant one thing. The game had started again. By late afternoon, the sky has turned the color of bruised steel. I keep the lights off, sitting by the window, watching the street. The world moves on as if it doesn't know what's coming, as if it doesn't feel the tremor before a storm. Luca sits cross-legged on the floor, humming quietly to himself while drawing. His pencil scratches softly against the paper. Steady, soothing. Then, a shadow shifts in the reflection of the glass. My heart stops. This time it isn't my imagination. There's a man standing by the motel's entrance. He's not moving, just watching. Patient, composed, as though he has all the time in the world. I don't need to see his face to know. There's a presence some people carry, a gravity that pulls the air out of every room they walk into. Damien. I can't breathe. 8 years collapse into one heartbeat. The sound of his voice, the touch of his hand, the look in his eyes the night I ran. It all comes rushing back like a tide I can't fight. I close my eyes and tell myself to stay calm. I can't let him see me like this. I can't let him see the fear. But when I open them again, he's gone. I stand slowly, my pulse still hammering. Maybe he left. Maybe he didn't. Either way, the air feels charged, thick with something electric and dangerous. I turn to check the locks on the door. Once, twice, 3 times. And that's when I hear it. A knock. Soft. Controlled. The kind of knock that doesn't ask permission. It expects obedience. For a long moment, I just stand there, frozen, the world narrowing to the sound of my breathing and the echo of that quiet, deliberate rhythm on the other side of the door. Luca looks up from his drawing. Mama! Go to the bathroom, I whisper. Lock the door. Don't come out until I say. He hesitates, sensing the edge in my voice, then nods and disappears behind the small door, the click of the lock echoing louder than any gunshot I've ever heard. Another knock. My hand shakes as I reach for the handle. I tell myself it could be anyone, the manager, a delivery, a stranger. But deep down, I know better. I've always known the difference between a man who knocks to be polite and one who knocks because he already owns what's behind the door. I turn the handle slowly, the hinges creaking as the door opens just wide enough for me to see him. 8 years vanish in an instant. Damien Costa stands in the doorway, dressed in black, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes darker than the storm behind him. The sight of him steals the air from my lungs. He looks older, harder, every line on his face carved deeper by power and loss. But his gaze, that same sharp, unrelenting gaze, pins me in place, and suddenly I'm 22 again, standing in the fire of a love that was always meant to destroy me. He doesn't speak. He just studies me, his eyes moving over my face as if searching for proof I'm real. Finally, his voice breaks the silence, deep, rough, and far too calm. 8 years, he says, and not a single word. I try to answer, but my voice won't come. He steps closer, the space between us shrinking until I can feel the heat of him, smell the faint trace of smoke and rain on his skin. His hand lifts, almost as if to touch me, then stops halfway, curling into a fist instead. "Where is he?" he asks quietly. The world tilts. "Who?" His eyes flick toward the bathroom door, then back to me. "Don't lie to me, Isabella. I already know." There are moments when time doesn't move forward, when it folds in on itself like a wound reopening, bleeding into the present no matter how many years you've spent trying to stitch it closed. Standing in front of Damien Costa again after 8 years felt exactly like that. Like stepping back into a nightmare that used to masquerade as a dream. He filled the doorway the same way he always had, not just with his size, but with something more dangerous, something invisible and consuming. Even now, even after everything, his presence seemed to claim the space, as if the air itself bent toward him out of habit. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence said enough. "Where is he?" he asked again, and there was a weight in those words that made my pulse stumble. I forced my hand to stay steady on the edge of the door. "You need to leave, Damien." He didn't. Of course he didn't. Men like him don't retreat. They advance, slowly, deliberately, until retreat is no longer possible for anyone. His gaze slid past me toward the dim light of the room, and for a moment I saw the calculation in his eyes, the cold, ruthless instinct that had made him king of this city's underworld. But then something flickered there, something raw and human that he tried to bury as quickly as it appeared. "I searched for you," he said quietly, and the softness of it was worse than anger. "Do you know how many bodies I buried trying to find yours?" "I didn't ask you to," I said, even though my voice trembled. He stepped closer, his hand braced against the doorframe, the veins along his wrist visible beneath his skin. "No," he said. "You just disappeared. No note, no goodbye. You vanished like you never existed, and you expect me to walk away now that you're standing in front of me again? I had my reasons." "Then tell me." His voice cracked like thunder beneath the surface, quiet but devastating. "Tell me, Isabella. Because if you don't, I'll find out myself, and you won't like how I do it." The way he said my name, Isabella, made something inside me twist painfully. It wasn't just a name to him, it was a memory, a weapon, a prayer. I tried to meet his gaze, but it was like staring into a past I wasn't ready to face. "You wouldn't understand," I whispered. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think I wouldn't understand betrayal?" Before I could respond, a sound cut through the tension, small, fragile, and impossibly loud in the silence that followed. A door creaked open behind me. I froze. Luca. He stood in the narrow space between the bathroom and the room, barefoot, hair tousled from sleep, his eyes wide and unguarded as they landed on Damien. For a moment, time truly stopped. No sound, no breath, no distance. Just the three of us suspended in a truth that couldn't be hidden any longer. Damien's expression changed in an instant. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something I'd never seen before, something wordless, disbelieving, almost tender, before it hardened again into stunned silence. He looked at me, then at Luca, then back again. "Isabella," he said, but his voice was no longer steady. It broke on my name like it was too heavy to carry. "Who is that?" My throat closed. I wanted to lie, to tell him Luca was a friend's child, to tell him it wasn't what he thought. But there are some truths that don't allow lies to exist around them. "He's my son," I said finally. I thought the words would sound stronger, cleaner, but they came out as a whisper, trembling under the weight of everything they meant. Damien's eyes flicked back to the boy. Luca, innocent and curious, tilted his head the way he always did when studying someone new. "Mama," he said softly, tugging at my sleeve, "who is that man?" Every breath felt like glass in my lungs. "Go back to the room, sweetheart." But Luca didn't move. His gaze met Damien's and something passed between them. Something silent, undeniable, cruel in its simplicity. Recognition, even without understanding. Damien took a slow step forward. "How old is he?" I didn't answer. "Isabella," he pressed, his voice quieter now, sharper. "How old?" I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. 7. His jaw tightened. He did the math instantly. Of course he did. His entire life had been built on calculating risks, enemies, outcomes. The realization hit him like a bullet. 8 years ago," he murmured. "You left 8 years ago." I couldn't look at him. The silence between us was a living thing, stretching until it nearly broke. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, then stopping, his back to me. When he finally turned around, the composure was gone. What replaced it wasn't rage, not yet, but something more dangerous. Disbelief bleeding into betrayal. "You kept him from me," he said, low and ragged. "You took my son and vanished like I was nothing." "You wouldn't have understood," I said, the words tumbling out too fast. "If I had stayed, he would have been a target. You had enemies everywhere. You were fighting wars I couldn't survive." "You think I wouldn't have protected you?" he snapped. "You would have killed for us," I shot back. "And that's exactly why I ran, because I didn't want my child growing up in a world built on blood." For a moment, he just stared at me, breathing hard, fists clenched at his sides. And then he laughed again, hollow and sharp. "You think running saved him from that? Do you know how many children of men like me have their father's sins written on their faces? You can't erase blood, Isabella. You can't hide what he is. He's not you." He looked at me then, truly looked, and I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Pain, maybe, or guilt, or the realization that some part of me still loved him despite everything. "No," he said finally, his voice quieter. "He's better." The words cut deeper than anger ever could. For a long time, none of us moved. The air was heavy with everything that had been lost, everything that had been stolen by silence and fear. Luca, sensing something too large to understand, clutched my hand and whispered, "Mama, I'm scared." Damien knelt slowly, lowering himself to the boy's height. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice barely more than a breath. "You don't have to be afraid." Luca blinked, studying him, and in that moment the resemblance between them was undeniable. The same jaw, the same storm-gray eyes that seemed to see too much. "Who are you?" For a heartbeat, Damien couldn't answer. Then quietly, "Someone who should have been here a long time ago." I turned away, unable to bear it. The tenderness in his tone, the quiet grief threaded through every word. When I finally looked back, he was standing again, his expression once more carved into steel. "Pack your things," he said. "What?" "You're coming with me." "No, Damien, we can't." He stepped closer, and though his voice stayed calm, I heard the command beneath it, the kind that didn't invite refusal. "You think I'll let you disappear again? You think I'll lose my son twice? No, Isabella. Whatever this is, whatever you're hiding, it ends now." I wanted to protest, to tell him that going with him would only drag us back into the very life I'd run from. But then I saw the flicker of movement through the window, the shadow of someone watching from across the street. A glint of metal caught the light. A scope. My blood ran cold. "Damien," I whispered. He followed my gaze just as the first shot shattered the glass. The sound of glass shattering is different when you know it's meant to kill you. It's sharper, deeper, like the air itself fractures with it. The first bullet tore through the window above my head. The second embedded itself in the wall behind Damien, showering the floor with splinters and dust. For one suspended heartbeat, everything froze. Luca's scream, Damien's hand reaching for me, the rush of panic pounding through my veins. And then the world exploded into motion. "Down!" Damien's voice cut through the chaos like thunder, low and commanding, the kind of tone that leaves no room for hesitation. His body collided with mine before I could even think, pinning me to the floor as another shot cracked through the air, splintering the dresser in a spray of wood and plaster. I could feel the heat of him against me, the weight of his chest, the rhythm of his breathing, the quiet restraint in every movement that told me he'd done this 100 times before. There was something both terrifying and safe about it, the paradox that had always defined him. "Where's the boy?" he demanded. I pointed toward the bathroom, my throat too tight to speak. Luca was crying now, small broken sounds that cut through the chaos far more painfully than the bullets. Damien crawled low across the floor, his hand finding mine briefly. Just enough to steady me, just enough to remind me that despite everything, he wasn't letting go this time. "Stay behind. Me," he ordered. He moved with precision, like the world around him existed in slow motion, his every decision calculated, lethal. He kicked the bathroom door open, scooped Luca into his arms, and turned back toward me, eyes already scanning the window for angles. "We need to move," he said. "Now." We rushed out through the side exit, the sound of sirens in the distance. Too soon to be the police, too coordinated to be coincidence. Damien's car was parked just beyond the alley, sleek and black, the kind of machine that didn't just drive. It fled. He opened the door, pushed Luca into my arms, and slid behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, and the city blurred into streaks of rain and light as we sped through the streets. My hands trembled around Luca, who clung to me, his face buried in my shoulder. I could still feel glass in my hair, the metallic taste of adrenaline on my tongue. "Who were they?" I asked, voice barely audible over the rush of the wind. "I don't know," Damien said, though the tightness in his jaw told me otherwise. "But they weren't mine." The city outside looked different now, less alive, more like a battlefield painted in neon. I could see the ghosts of our past in every street we passed, every corner where blood once dried unnoticed. I'd spent years convincing myself I'd escaped this world, but sitting in that car with him again, I realized I'd never really left. We drove for what felt like hours, weaving through streets I didn't recognize, until the skyline began to fade and the buildings gave way to trees and darkness. The rain had turned to mist by the time he slowed, the tires crunching over gravel as we pulled into the long drive of an estate I didn't know existed. The house loomed ahead, old and vast, its windows dark and unwelcoming. I could tell immediately it wasn't one of his main residences. Too quiet, too forgotten, a safe house, a ghost among ghosts. "Get inside," he said as he stepped out, already scanning the shadows. I carried Luca through the doorway, my heart still pounding from the adrenaline that refused to fade. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, the kind of scent that belonged to places abandoned but not forgotten. He closed the door behind us, locking it, then turned to face me. For a moment, the silence between us was unbearable, all the things unsaid pressing against the walls. "Are you hurt?" he asked finally. "No," I said. "But Luca, he's fine." His tone softened just slightly as he looked at the boy, now clinging to my hand, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "He's strong." The way he said it, the quiet pride, the disbelief that his son stood in front of him, made my throat ache. I wanted to hate him, to remember the man who'd made me run. But in that moment, all I could see was the one who had just saved us. He turned toward the window, his back to me. "They were aiming for you." I froze. "What?" He glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "Those shots weren't meant for me, Isabella. They knew where you were staying. They knew who you are." "That's impossible." He shook his head. "Nothing's impossible in my world." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The truth hit me like cold water. Someone had sent that letter. Someone who knew my secret, who knew exactly how to pull me back into Damien's orbit. Maybe that had been the plan all along. "I didn't come back to cause this," I whispered. "Then why did you?" His voice was calm, but I could feel the fury beneath it. Not at me, but at the world that had stolen 8 years from him. I wanted to tell him everything, about the night I left, about the blood on my hands, about the reason I could never truly come home. But the words tangled in my throat. I wasn't ready. Not yet. "I came back because someone found us," I said instead. "Because I got a letter. No name, no signature, just a threat." He turned fully then, eyes narrowing. "A threat?" I nodded. "It said you deserve to know, that they deserve to die." He took a slow breath, processing, every movement deliberate. "You should have come to me the moment you got it." "You were the reason I had to run!" I snapped, the fear and exhaustion twisting into anger. "You think I forgot what your protection looks like? You think I forgot what it costs?" His expression darkened, but he didn't move closer. "Everything has a cost, Isabella. You don't get to pretend you didn't know that when you fell in love with me." The words hit harder than the gunfire. I wanted to argue, but he was right. I had known exactly who he was. A man made of shadows and oaths, capable of love so fierce it bordered on violence. I'd loved him anyway. And part of me still did. He stepped closer then, slowly, cautiously, as if approaching something fragile. "Whoever sent that letter," he said, "they'll come again. They don't stop until they get what they want." "What do they want?" I asked. He looked at me, and for a heartbeat I thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly, "You." The word lingered in the air between us, heavy and dangerous. I felt Luca press closer to my side, his small fingers curling into my sleeve. Damien's gaze softened for a fraction of a second when it landed on him, then hardened again with new resolve. "We stay here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow I find out who's behind this." "And if it's someone from your family?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. "Then they're already dead. They just don't know it yet." The firelight flickered across his face, painting him in shades of gold and shadow. For the first time, I realized how much older he looked. Not just in years, but in weight. The empire he'd built was cracking, the ghosts he'd buried clawing, their way back to the surface. As the house settled into silence, I sat beside Luca until he fell asleep. my hand tracing the edge of his hair, my heart heavy with the truth I still hadn't spoken. Because the man Damien had killed 8 years ago, the one that started it all, the one that made me run, hadn't been a stranger. He'd been my brother. And soon, Damien would know. The night was quieter than it had any right to be. Outside the windows, the forest stretched in endless blackness, the trees swaying in the wind like sentinels guarding secrets too old to speak. Inside, the house felt heavier with each passing hour, a place that wasn't quite safe but was safer than anywhere else, for now. Damien hadn't spoken much since we arrived. He paced like a caged animal, phone pressed to his ear, issuing orders in a voice that stayed calm only because fury was useless when it didn't yet know its target. I sat on the worn leather couch near the fire, watching the flames rise and fall, their reflection dancing across the glass. Luca slept in the adjoining room, his small figure curled beneath a blanket, his breathing soft and even. Every so often, Damien's voice would drift from the next room. Low, deliberate, the sound of power wearing its patience thin. I told myself I should feel safe, but safety was an illusion, one I'd long since learned to distrust. When he finally returned, the phone still in his hand, his expression told me everything before he spoke. "They weren't local," he said. "Whoever fired those shots wasn't one of my men, or any of the other families in the city. Too clean, too coordinated." "So what does that mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "It means this isn't about me," he said. His eyes met mine, unflinching. "It's about you." My pulse skipped. "You're wrong." He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between us like a storm. "Don't lie to me again, Isabella. Someone went through the trouble of finding you after 8 years, tracked you across 3 countries, waited until you were within my reach, and then took a shot at you. You tell me what that means." The fire popped, a spark snapping in the silence. I turned my face away, but not quickly enough. He saw the flicker of fear before I could hide it. "You know something," he said softly, and there was no accusation in his tone, only certainty. I shook my head. "It doesn't matter now." "The hell it doesn't." He crossed the room in 2 long strides, his hand braced against the wall above me, his shadow spilling across my skin. His voice dropped to a whisper that felt heavier than shouting. "You left me without a word, without a trace. You stole my son and vanished. I let myself believe you were dead because it was easier than admitting you might have chosen to disappear. Now you're here, and people are dying for it. So don't tell me it doesn't matter." The sound of his breathing filled the space between us. I could smell the faint trace of rain on his clothes, the bitterness of whiskey and gunpowder that always clung to him. He had always been larger than life, too much to love, too dangerous to hate. And even now, even after everything, part of me still wanted to reach for him. "I ran because staying meant death," I said finally, my voice breaking. "Not just for me, for him, for our son." He hesitated. "From who?" I opened my mouth and closed it again. The truth was like a blade in my throat. I'd carried it too long to know how to speak it anymore. But even as I stayed silent, the memory uncoiled. Slow, suffocating, inescapable. It was 8 years ago, the night everything shattered. The night Damien's world and mine collided in blood. I'd gone to meet my brother Matteo after weeks of ignoring his calls. He'd fallen deep into trouble. Gambling, debt, the kind that doesn't forgive easily. He was waiting in the shadows of the old pier, pale and shaking, the sea wind biting through the dark. "I didn't mean to cross him," he'd said. "I didn't know who he was." I'd known. Even then, I'd known the name he was too afraid to speak. Damien Costa. Matteo begged for help, said he could fix it if he had time, if he could explain. I'd promised to talk to Damien myself, to beg him for mercy, to use whatever was left of the love between us to save my brother's life. But when Damien arrived, he wasn't the man who held me through sleepless nights or whispered plans for the future. He was the Don, the judge, the executioner. He thought Matteo had betrayed him, sold information to the Russians, traded loyalty for cash. And no matter what I said, he wouldn't listen. His men surrounded us, and the wind was full of salt and violence. When the gun went off, I screamed. The sound still echoes sometimes in my dreams, the thunder of it, the way Matteo's body crumpled, the way Damien's eyes met mine afterward, full of fury he mistook for righteousness. He never knew Matteo was my brother. I never told him. I couldn't. Because if I had, it would have destroyed him. And it would have destroyed me. So I ran. I ran before his grief turned to suspicion, before the Empire started asking questions I couldn't answer. And I've been running ever since. When the memory faded, I was trembling. Damien was watching me closely, his expression unreadable. He didn't know the story I'd just relived. Not yet. But I could see the questions rising in his eyes like storm clouds. "There's more you're not telling me," he said quietly. I swallowed hard. "You don't want to know." He leaned closer, his voice rough and low. "Isabella, I have built an empire out of the truth most men are too afraid to face. Don't tell me what I want to know." For a moment, I almost told him everything. The pier, the shot, the way his name still burned on my tongue when I screamed. But the words caught on something fragile, something dangerous. If I told him, it wouldn't just break him, it would unleash the kind of war neither of us could survive. "I'll protect you," he said after a moment, softer now, as if sensing my silence wasn't defiance but fear. "Both of you. Whatever this is, whatever you think you've done, it's over." He meant it. That was the cruelest part. He always meant it. But some debts can't be protected from. Some bloodstains don't wash away, no matter how much love you drown them in. That night, after Damien finally fell asleep in the chair near the fire, I sat awake watching him. The flicker of the flames, painting his face in gold and shadow. He looked different when he slept. Younger, almost peaceful, as if the violence in him needed rest, too. I thought about how easy it would be to leave again, to take Luca and disappear before morning. I thought about the letter, the sniper, the way the past had clawed its way back no matter how many borders I crossed. And I realized the truth I'd been running from wasn't just about Matteo's death. It was about what came after. Because the man who had ordered Matteo's debt collected, the one who had set everything in motion, wasn't Damien's rival at all. He'd been Damien's closest ally, his consigliere, his oldest friend. And he was still alive. The house had begun to breathe again, slow and uncertain, like a creature waking after years of sleep. The fire burned lower each night, and the world outside stayed dark. The forest whispering in the wind, as if it knew what hid within its heart. It had been 3 days since the attack, 3 days of silence, 3 days of waiting for a peace that didn't belong to us. Damien had turned one of the upstairs rooms into a command post. A desk, a map, a laptop, a phone that never stopped vibrating. His men came and went in hushed voices, their faces carved with tension. Every few hours, one of them would glance toward the closed door of the smaller room at the end of the hall, Luca's room, and look away quickly, as if afraid to be caught staring at something that didn't belong in their world. My son didn't seem to notice. He spent his days drawing, sitting cross-legged on the floor near the window, the light falling across his hair in soft gold. He didn't ask about the men or the guns or the way Damien's voice turned sharp when he spoke into the phone. To him, it was all temporary, just another place we were passing through, another storm to wait out. Children adapt faster than grown hearts do. But Damien noticed everything. The first time he stood in the doorway, watching Luca draw, He didn't speak. He just leaned there for a long time, silent, unreadable, as if memorizing something fragile he was afraid to touch. When he finally did move, it was slow. A man learning how to walk again. "What are you drawing?" he asked. Luca looked up, his gray eyes curious but cautious. "A wolf." Damien nodded, kneeling beside him. "Looks strong." "He's not," Luca said matter-of-factly. "He's tired. He lost his pack." I watched from the hall, unseen, my chest tightening. Damien didn't respond right away. His gaze stayed on the page, on the dark lines of the wolf standing alone in a forest of charcoal trees. "Then he has to find it again," he said finally. Luca shook his head. "Sometimes packs don't want you back." The silence that followed felt too deep for either of them to break. And then quietly, Damien said, "Then you build a new one." Luca smiled, small, hesitant, and Damien smiled back. It wasn't much, but it was enough to undo me. That night, when Luca finally fell asleep, I stood at the window overlooking the long gravel drive. The fog had thickened, blurring the trees into silhouettes. I could see the faint red glow of a cigarette by the gate, one of Damien's guards on watch. It should have made me feel safe, but instead it felt like a warning. Safety never lasts long around men like Damien Costa. I didn't hear him enter the room until he spoke. "You're awake," he said, his voice low, steady, threaded with exhaustion. I turned. He stood by the door, still in his black shirt, sleeves rolled up, the faint sheen of rain on his shoulders. There were lines under his eyes now that hadn't been there before, the weight of a man who hasn't slept in days. "Couldn't sleep," I said. He stepped closer, the light from the fire catching the edge of his face. "You used to say that when you were scared." "I used to say that when you were working late," I replied quietly. He smiled, faintly, almost painfully. Maybe those were the same thing. I looked back toward the window. "You should get some rest." "I can't," he said simply. "Not until I know who did this." He moved to stand beside me, the silence stretching between us, filled with the things neither of us dared to say. The rain had started again, soft against the glass. "Your son," he said finally, the words careful, reverent. "He's remarkable." I swallowed hard. "He's nothing like me." "No," Damien said. "He's everything like you." I wanted to argue, but there was no point. He saw what he wanted to see. And maybe he wasn't wrong. Luca had my quiet stubbornness, my need to protect what little light I had left. But he had Damien's eyes, Damien's focus, Damien's way of seeing straight through people. "You should tell him the truth one day," Damien said softly. "About what?" "About me." The words hit like a bruise. He's too young to understand. He turned to face me fully, his voice quiet but unyielding. "Children understand more than we think. He deserves to know who he is." "And what is he, Damien?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. "Your heir? Your next soldier? The son of a man who kills for power?" He flinched, barely, but I saw it. "He's my blood. And that's exactly why I kept him from you." His jaw tightened. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The storm outside grew heavier, thunder rumbling far away, the wind pressing against the house like an uninvited guest. Then, without another word, Damien walked past me and poured himself a drink from the decanter by the fire. The ice cracked under the amber liquid. "You think I'm a monster," he said. "Maybe I am. But monsters don't get to choose what they love." His voice was calm, but something broke in it. Something small and dangerous. I didn't answer. He turned toward the window, his reflection fractured by the glass. "One of my men went missing tonight," he said. "No warning, no trace. He was loyal. Or at least I thought he was." My pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" I'm saying someone inside my house is feeding information, he said quietly. They knew where you were before I did. They knew about the boy. I felt the air leave my lungs. You think they're here? I think they've been here longer than you have. He set the glass down, untouched, and crossed the room to stand closer. Not in anger this time, but in something colder, sharper. Whoever it is, they want to finish what was started 8 years ago. They want to break me, and they're using you to do it. I tried to steady my breathing, but the room felt smaller by the second. What if they're not after you? He frowned. What do you mean? What if they're after him? I whispered, glancing toward Luca's door. For a moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, the truth dawned on his face. The possibility he hadn't let himself consider. His hand went to the gun at his side instinctively, his entire body shifting into the cold precision of the man I used to know. He started toward the hall, but I caught his arm. Damien, I said, my voice shaking. What if this is because of what happened before I left? He froze. What happened? I opened my mouth, the words clawing their way up. But before I could speak, the lights flickered once, then died. Darkness swallowed the room. Outside, a single gunshot echoed through the rain. Damien's hand found mine instantly, his voice low and sharp. Stay with me. Don't move. But I was already shaking. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew. This wasn't just his war anymore. It was mine, and the ghosts I'd buried 8 years ago were finally coming home. There is a silence that comes after gunfire. Not peace, not calm, but the fragile pause between fear and understanding, when you're too stunned to breathe and too alive to believe you've survived. That was the silence that filled the house after the shot outside. The rain beat harder against the windows, the sound sharp as whispered warnings, and somewhere in the distance I could hear footsteps. Too fast, too many. Damien moved first. Stay with Luca, he ordered, his voice low, taut, precise. But I couldn't stay still. The darkness pressed in on all sides, and the faint metallic scent of blood drifted through the hall before I even saw it. The backup generator clicked once, then sputtered, bathing the house in flickering yellow light that made the shadows move like living things. Damien, I whispered, my hand gripping the edge of the wall. He turned briefly, his gun already drawn, his eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. Don't move unless I tell you. The sound of the front door slamming open cracked through the silence. 2 of Damien's men stumbled in, soaked, their boots leaving muddy prints across the floor. One of them, Tomas, was clutching his arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. They came through the woods, Tomas gasped. We were ambushed. He didn't finish. A shot tore through the room, hitting him square in the chest. He fell instantly. I screamed before I could stop myself, and Damien grabbed me, pushing me behind the column near the fireplace as another bullet shattered the mirror across from us. Get down! He barked. The air filled with gunfire, smoke, and the acrid tang of burning powder. I could barely see through the haze, but I recognized the sound of Damien's voice as he shouted orders in Italian, the deadly calm in every word. His men responded without hesitation, returning fire toward the broken windows. I crawled toward Luca's room, heart pounding so hard I could taste it. He was hiding beneath the bed, clutching his sketchbook against his chest, eyes wide and shining with tears. Don't move, I whispered, reaching for him. Don't make a sound. He nodded, his small body trembling. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it began. The silence that followed was worse. Damien stood by the staircase, his back to me, his gun still raised. The front door creaked open again. Slow this time, deliberate. And then I saw him. Franco. Damien's consigliere. The man who had stood beside him at every negotiation, who had toasted our engagement years ago, who had whispered promises of loyalty like prayers. Only now he wasn't smiling. His face was slick with rain, his eyes empty of anything human. "Franco," Damien said, his voice low, almost incredulous. "You?" Franco shrugged, stepping forward. "It was always going to end this way. You were family. Family is just a word men like us use to make betrayal sound poetic." I felt the room tilt. I knew that voice. I remembered it from 8 years ago, the night at the pier. The voice behind the deal that had killed my brother. I hadn't seen his face then, but I'd never forgotten the tone. Smooth, unhurried, unrepentant. "You killed Matteo," I said before I realized I'd spoken. Both men turned toward me. Damien's expression changed instantly. Confusion, disbelief, dawning horror. "What did you say?" he demanded. Franco smiled. "So she didn't tell you? How quaint." "Isabella," Damien said, his voice shaking for the first time. "What is he talking about?" Franco took another step forward, lowering his gun slightly, as if savoring the moment. 8 years ago, your little dove ran because she saw something she shouldn't have. She saw what happens when you mix love with loyalty. I gave the order to collect the debt her brother owed. You pulled the trigger." The world spun. Damien froze, every muscle in his body tensing, his breath caught between rage and disbelief. "No." "Yes," Franco said, his smile widening. "The boy gambled with your money, your reputation. You did what had to be done. The only thing you didn't know was who he was." Damien's gaze swung back to me, and in that moment, I saw everything I'd feared reflected in his eyes. The devastation, the betrayal, the self-loathing he would never forgive himself for. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice raw, broken. "Tell me it's not true." My throat burned. "I tried," I said. "I tried to tell you that night, but you wouldn't listen. You were angry, you were—" "Stop." His voice cracked like a whip. "You let me live with this. You let me think you left because of me." "I left because I was pregnant," I shouted, the words tearing out of me. "Because I couldn't raise our child in the shadow of what you'd done. Because I loved you too much to let you see what you'd become." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. "And now you bring him back? My son? Into this?" Franco laughed quietly, the sound cold and cruel. How poetic. A family reunion built on graves. Damien's fury snapped. He turned the gun on Franco, his hand steady, his voice nothing but ice. "You've been feeding them information. You sold me out. You killed her brother. You—" Franco didn't let him finish. He fired first. The shot missed by inches, grazing Damien's shoulder. The recoil sent him stumbling, but he recovered instantly, returning fire. The room erupted again, glass shattering, wood splintering, smoke thick enough to choke. I pulled Luca from under the bed, shielding him with my body as the chaos unfolded. The air was alive with violence, with the sound of a world tearing itself apart. Then, silence again. When I looked up, Franco was on the floor, blood pooling beneath him, Damien standing over him with the gun still raised. His face was unreadable, not victory, not relief, just emptiness. Franco coughed, the sound wet, final. "You think this ends with me?" he rasped. "You think you can kill the debt?" Damien's voice was quiet, steady. "I don't kill debts, I erase them." He pulled the trigger. The echo lingered longer than the life it took. When it was over, Damien dropped the gun, his hand shaking. Blood dripped from his shoulder, staining his shirt, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes found mine again, and for a long time neither of us spoke. Then he said, almost whispering, "I killed your brother." I shook my head, tears burning hot. "You killed a man who betrayed you. The rest, that was his doing." "No," he said. "It was mine, all of it." Luca clung to my side, silent, wide-eyed, watching a man unravel in front of him. Damien sank to his knees, his hand pressed to the wound on his shoulder, the firelight flickering over his face. "I can't undo it," he said, "but I can make sure no one else pays for what I did." "Damien!" He looked up, and there was something final in his eyes. A decision already made, a truth too heavy to carry any longer. "Take him," he said softly. "Go, before they come for me too." I shook my head, panic rising. "No, we stay together." He smiled, that same broken smile that once melted every wall I built. "You already did what I couldn't. You ran. Now do it again." Outside, the sound of approaching engines grew louder. More men, more ghosts. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. Damien stood, blood on his sleeve, his voice quiet but sure. "If they want me, they'll get me, but not you, not him." And as he turned toward the door, I realized that love, for Damien Costa, had never been about forever. It had always been about sacrifice. The night was alive with motion. The whisper of trees in the wind, the growl of engines in the distance, the heavy rhythm of footsteps that weren't ours. The air smelled of smoke and rain, of metal and endings. Damien had pressed the car keys into my hand only minutes ago, his blood still fresh on his shirt, his eyes too calm for a man who'd just chosen to die. "Take him," he'd said again, his voice low but unshakable. "There's a safe route through the forest, East Road 12 miles. There's a man there, Rossi. He owes me his life. He'll take you far from here." "I'm not leaving you," I'd told him, my throat closing. But his gaze held mine, unwavering, full of all the things he couldn't say aloud. "You already did once," he whispered, "and it saved you. Don't waste that chance now." Now the car tore through the darkness, headlights cutting thin lines through the fog. Luca sat in the back, clutching his sketchbook to his chest, silent, his eyes wide with confusion and something deeper, a fear he didn't yet have the words for. The forest stretched endless around us, wet leaves flashing silver in the lights, the road slick with rain. Every sound, a branch snapping, an engine echoing somewhere far behind, sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. I glanced into the rearview mirror once, half expecting to see Damien's car behind us, headlights burning through the fog, but the road stayed empty. He was still there. He was fighting. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, every muscle in my arms trembling. "We're almost safe," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. "Just hold on." Luca didn't answer. He just stared out the window, his breath fogging the glass. After a moment, he said quietly, "He's coming back, isn't he?" I hesitated. "He'll find us when it's safe." He nodded, but his small hands clenched tighter around the sketchbook. He knew I was lying. Children always do. The rain came harder. I turned off the headlights, coasting in darkness for a moment, the world shrinking to the sound of the engine and my own heartbeat. Somewhere deep inside, under the terror, there was a terrible stillness. The knowledge that the man I'd run from for 8 years had finally found the one thing stronger than vengeance: love. And now he was using it as a weapon. Damien, the night bled red. When Isabella's car disappeared into the trees, I turned back toward the house, toward the sound of approaching engines, and let the last of my hesitation burn away. There's a moment before violence when the world holds its breath. And then it exhales in fire. My men were waiting by the steps, 2 of them wounded, 3 already gone. Franco's betrayal had gutted what little loyalty was left, and now I could see the rot spreading. Faces I'd trusted for years, shifting, uncertain. "Anyone who stays," I said, my voice like gravel, "stays to the end." They didn't move. Not one of them. Good. The first car burst through the gates, headlights flaring, tires screaming against the gravel. I raised my gun and fired. The windshield shattered. The car swerved, slammed into a tree. Flames licked at the rain, struggling to live. More engines, more light. The storm had come for me, and I met it head-on. The fight blurred into sound and movement, shouts, gunfire, the smell of rain mixed with smoke and blood. I moved through it like memory, like instinct. Every step was a rhythm I'd learned long ago. Shoot, duck, reload, breathe. But even as I fought, I saw Isabella's face in flashes. Her eyes, her trembling hands, the way she'd said I loved you too much to let you see what you'd become. And maybe she'd been right. Maybe this was all I was ever meant to be. A man built for war, whose peace only ever came after the last shot. One of the men rushed me from behind. I caught him with an elbow, turned, fired. Another fell. Then another. The ground was slick beneath my boots, the storm washing everything clean except the guilt that lived under my skin. When the last echo faded, I stood in the ruins of what used to be my life. Glass, fire, rain. The empire I'd built had devoured itself, and I had helped it feed. I looked toward the woods, toward the faint curve of the road disappearing into mist, and for a moment, I thought I saw her taillights. Small, fading, distant. Go, I thought. Go before I have to chase you again. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple, because the man who had ordered this attack, the one who had whispered betrayal into Franco's ear, wasn't finished. And as long as he lived, neither was I. Isabella. The rain had turned the road into rivers by the time we reached the old bridge. The headlights cut out twice before I made it across, the engine sputtering like it wanted to die. I stopped just beyond the tree line, breathless, listening. Silence. But then, a voice. "Keep driving, Mrs. Costa." The man stepped from the shadows, tall, broad, a rifle slung over his shoulder. His hair was silver now, but I recognized him immediately. Rossi, Damien's oldest ally. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said. "I didn't," I whispered. He looked past me to the boy in the back seat. His eyes softened just for a moment. "He looks like him." I didn't answer. He motioned toward the road. "Follow me. There's a cabin in the hills. You'll be safe there until he finds you." His words hit something deep and fragile inside me. Until he finds you. As if it were inevitable. As if the world itself couldn't keep Damien from what he loved. We drove in silence, the road narrowing into dirt, trees bending low like they wanted to hide us. But even in the safety of the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow felt sentient, every sound deliberate. And then, as we crested the hill, the cabin came into view. Small, wooden, dark against the rain. Safe, Rossi had said. But I knew better than to believe in that word anymore. He parked ahead of me, stepped out, and started toward the porch. That's when I saw it, the faint glint of movement near the window, too deliberate, too still. "Rossi!" I shouted, but it was too late. The shot split the air. He fell without a sound. I ducked behind the car, pulling Luca down with me. My hands shook as I reached for the small pistol Damien had shoved into the glove box earlier. "If anything happens," he'd told me, "aim for the eyes." The forest was alive again, not with wind this time, but with footsteps. Whoever they were, they knew where to find us. I crouched low, heart hammering, Luca clinging to my arm. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Are they here for us?" I swallowed hard. "They're here for him," I said, "but they'll take us first." He looked up at me, his gray eyes steady in a way that broke me. "Then we don't let them." Before I could answer, headlights appeared down the hill. One car, then two, then three, and at the front, unmistakable even through the fog and rain, was Damien's car. Damien. I didn't remember driving. I just remembered blood, rain, and the road stretching like a wound before me. Rossi's call had never come through, and I knew what that meant before I saw the bodies. When I reached the cabin, the door was open. A man lay on the porch, lifeless, the rain painting his skin silver. And then, her voice. Damien! I turned. She stood by the car, pistol raised, Luca clinging to her. Behind them, the forest shifted, the enemy closing in, dark shapes in the fog. Get inside! I shouted. The gunfire began again, echoing through the trees like thunder. And as I reached for her hand, as our fingers brushed in the rain and fire, I realized there would be no more running. This was the end of escape, and the beginning of war. The forest was no longer silent. It breathed and screamed and broke beneath the violence of men. Rain fell in cold sheets, cutting through smoke and fog, washing over blood that gleamed black beneath the headlights. The cabin at the hilltop glowed faintly in the storm, fragile and defiant, like a flicker of hope refusing to die. I could barely hear anything over the thunder and gunfire, but I knew Damien was close. I could feel him, not just in sound, but in that strange, invisible pull that had always existed between us, the one that had survived time and distance and betrayal. Get inside, he shouted again, his voice breaking through the chaos like a promise. I pushed Luca toward the doorway, keeping my body between him and the storm of bullets tearing through the trees. Run, I whispered, my hand trembling on his shoulder. Hide under the stairs, don't come out until I say so. He hesitated, his eyes searching mine for something solid in the madness. You'll come too? Yes, I lied, because that's what mothers do. He nodded, clutching his sketchbook to his chest as he disappeared into the shadows. Then I turned back. Damien was a silhouette against the flashes of light. Tall, relentless, his movements precise and brutal. The rhythm of a man who'd danced with death too many times to fear it anymore. Every shot he fired found its mark. Every step forward felt like defiance against fate itself. But there were too many of them. 3 cars now. 6 men. Maybe more. I could see their shapes moving between the trees, hear their shouted orders cutting through the rain. Damien! I screamed, raising the pistol with shaking hands. He turned, saw me, and his expression shifted. Fury, fear, love, all tangled into one impossible emotion. Stay down! But I didn't. I fired once, twice, the recoil jarring up my arms. One of the men fell, the other stumbled, but it wasn't enough. They kept coming. The flash of gunfire lit Damien's face for an instant, and I saw the blood streaked across his jaw, the exhaustion carved into his eyes. But also something else. Something like resolve. He was fighting for more than his life. He was fighting for ours. When he reached me, he grabbed my wrist, pulling me against the wall of the cabin. You shouldn't have stayed, he growled, his voice raw. I'm done running, I said. His eyes searched mine, and for a heartbeat the world shrank to just us, rain and blood and breath. Then stay close. The door burst open before I could answer. 2 men stormed in, shouting, guns raised. Damien moved faster than I thought possible. 1 shot to the chest, another to the throat. The bodies hit the floor, heavy and final. Upstairs, he ordered. There's a window, back exit. But as we started up the stairs, a shadow moved at the landing. The man who stepped forward was familiar. Younger, nervous, face slick with rain and terror. Damien, he said, his gun shaking. They said you'd surrender. Damien's eyes darkened. You were one of mine. The man swallowed. They said they'd let me live. Damien sighed, a soft, weary sound that broke something in me. Then you should have known better. The gun went off, not his. Mine. The man crumpled before he could fire. Smoke curled from my hands, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Damien looked at me, something fierce and fragile in his eyes. "You never miss," he said quietly. "I learned from you," I whispered. Outside, the engines roared again. Another wave was coming. We were running out of time. Damien pulled me into the small upstairs room overlooking the road. The window was cracked, the wind pouring through. Below, I could see movement. Men positioning themselves, their rifles gleaming under the rain. "This is it," he said, his tone almost peaceful. "No," I said. "No, there's still a way." He turned to me, and in that moment he wasn't the Mafia boss, the killer, the man who'd built an empire out of blood and loyalty. He was just Damien, the man who once kissed me by the sea, who once dreamed of leaving all this behind. "There's always a way," I said again, my voice trembling. "There has to be." He reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from my face, his hand rough, gentle. "You said that once," he murmured, "the night you left." I swallowed hard. "And I was wrong to go?" He shook his head. "No. You saved him. You saved yourself. Maybe that's all any of us get. One chance to protect what matters." A gunshot shattered the window beside us, the glass exploding inward. I ducked, but Damien didn't flinch. He fired back through the hole, dropping the shooter with a precision that made my stomach twist. Then another sound, a child's scream. "Luca!" I ran, ignoring Damien's shout, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the storm. I found him in the corner of the lower room, clutching the torn edge of his sketchbook, tears streaking his face. A bullet had torn through the floor near him, splintering the wood. I pulled him close, my hands trembling. "It's okay. It's okay." Damien appeared behind me, breathing hard, blood soaking through his sleeve. "We have to end this now," he said. He knelt beside Luca, his hand cupping the boy's cheek, his voice soft in a way I'd never heard before. "You're going to be brave, okay? You're going to take your mother and run down the hill. Don't stop until you reach the road." "No," Luca cried. "I'm not leaving you." Damien smiled, tired and proud. "You're my son. That means you never run from fear. But sometimes you run for love." Before I could stop him, he rose, turned toward the door, and stepped back into the rain. I wanted to follow, to drag him back inside, but something in his eyes when he looked over his shoulder told me it would be useless. He wasn't leaving the hill alive. The rain swallowed him whole. Gunfire lit the trees again, thunderous and endless. I held Luca against me, every muscle trembling, waiting for the moment I would have to move. And then, through the storm, I heard his voice. Not a shout, not a command, but a single word carried through the chaos. "Go!" I ran. Branches tore at my clothes, mud splashed up my legs, Luca's small hand clutching mine so tightly it hurt. Behind us, the world burned. Flashes of light in the trees, the roar of engines, the final furious symphony of a man who refused to die quietly. When we reached the edge of the forest, I turned one last time. The cabin was on fire. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The flames rose high, golden against the storm, the smoke curling upward like the ghost of everything we'd been. I could still hear faint gunfire, still hope, still denial. "Mom," Luca whispered, his voice breaking. "Is he—" "Don't look," I said, pulling him close. "Don't ever look back." But I did. I looked until the fire blurred with the rain, until the night swallowed it whole, until the only thing left was silence. And somewhere deep inside that silence, I knew it wasn't over. Because love like ours doesn't die in fire. It hides in the smoke. It waits. And something told me that Damien Costa wasn't finished yet. Dawn came late that morning, reluctant and pale, as if the sun itself couldn't bear to look at what the night had left behind. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. The smell of smoke, the broken branches, the silence heavy enough to crush the heart. The cabin was nothing but a skeleton of ash and timber now, its charred remains smoldering in the cold light, and I stood at the edge of the forest, Luca's hand in mine, unable to move. The world felt hollow. The forest birds had not yet returned, the earth still damp with rain and blood. Everything that had defined Damien, his empire, his power, his fury, had burned to the ground in one night, leaving behind only the question that haunted every breath I took. Was he gone with it? Rossi's men arrived just before sunrise, silent shadows moving through the smoke, faces grim but respectful. They had been loyal to him once, before the world fractured, before loyalty became a wound. One of them, an older man with a scar across his cheek, removed his hat as he approached me. "We found bodies," he said quietly. "Too many to count, but not him." My heart skipped. "Not him?" He shook his head. "The fire was too strong. We searched what we could. No body, no sign." I should have felt hope. Instead, I felt nothing, because hope was dangerous, and I had lived too long in its shadow. "Maybe that's mercy," I whispered. "Maybe the fire didn't take him. Maybe he finally let go." The man nodded, though I could tell he didn't believe it either. "He was a hard one to kill," he said. "If anyone could walk out of hell, it'd be him." I turned back toward the ashes, the rising smoke curling like ghosts. That night replayed behind my eyes in fragments. His voice in the storm, his hand pulling me from the fire, the last time I saw him disappear into the light. And in those moments before dawn, when the forest was quiet and the world felt half asleep, I almost imagined I could still hear him. A whisper carried through the wind. "Go." So I did. Weeks passed. The city felt smaller when I returned, older, grayer, stripped of its power. Word spread fast that the Costa Empire had fallen, its soldiers scattered, its name buried. Some said Damien had died in the fire. Others claimed they saw him in the north, wounded, alive, rebuilding. I didn't chase any of it. I'd spent too many years chasing ghosts already. Luca and I found a place by the sea, far from the noise, far from the eyes that still remembered the sins of our name. The house was small, white walls, faded blue shutters, flowers growing wild in the cracks of the stone path. The kind of place where nothing terrible should ever happen, though terrible things always find their way eventually. The ocean became our silence. Every morning, Luca would walk down to the shore, barefoot, his sketchbook under his arm. He didn't draw wolves anymore. He drew faces, some he'd seen, some he missed, some that still lived only in his memory. Sometimes I caught him sketching Damien. He never asked me if it was right. He just drew, quietly, as if creating proof that his father had existed. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. One evening, months later, a letter arrived. No return address, no seal, just a single page folded cleanly in half. My name wasn't written on it, but I knew it was meant for me the moment I touched it. The handwriting was his. "There are some debts you can't erase, only rewrite. You told me once that love and forgiveness were the same thing. Both impossible until you've already lost everything. You were right. Don't come looking for me. I'm not gone, but I'm no longer the man you knew. I've buried him in the fire he built. Raise our son with peace, not memory. Tell him his father learned too late that the truest power isn't fear. It's mercy. If you ever stand by the sea and feel the wind shift, know that I'm somewhere beneath it. D." I read it once, then again, until the ink blurred through my tears. It didn't say where he was. It didn't need to. He had always been like that. Half-truths and riddles, power wrapped in poetry, as if the only way to live with what he'd done was to turn it into something beautiful. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it inside Luca's sketchbook when he wasn't looking. Some truths are meant to be found later, when the heart is ready to bear them. That night, I walked down to the beach alone. The sea was calm, moonlight glinting off its surface, waves whispering secrets to the sand. The air smelled of salt and rain and the faint, burning memory of smoke. I closed my eyes and let the wind catch my hair, and for a moment I could almost feel him, standing just beyond reach, his hand on my back, his breath warm against my ear. "You survived," he would have said. That was always the point. I smiled through the ache in my chest. "No," I whispered into the night. "We did." Behind me, from the window of our house, a light flickered. Luca's shadow moving inside, the boy who had become both the past and the future of everything we'd fought for. He would grow up not knowing the full weight of his father's sins, but understanding his love, the kind that burned too bright, too fierce, too costly. And maybe that was enough. The waves crept higher along the sand, brushing the edge of my feet, cool and endless. I bent down, tracing my fingers through the water, and whispered one last promise. Not to Damien, not even to myself, but to the silence that had carried us here. I won't run anymore. The horizon shimmered faintly, light breaking through clouds, the world slowly remembering how to breathe again. Somewhere miles away, maybe across an ocean, maybe only a few towns over, I like to imagine him standing the same way, looking at the same dawn. A scar along his shoulder where the bullet had grazed. A ghost of a smile on his lips as he watched the world wake. We would never find each other again. Not in this lifetime. But we would both keep our oaths. The ones written in blood and the ones written in love. And if there was peace in that, then maybe that was what redemption really looked like. Not forgiveness, not forgetting. Just survival.